Hello, Granville Chapel. It's good to be with you guys again. I've been missing this. I really thought COVID-19 would be over by now. I guess you guys thought the same. It sucks to be here in front of a camera instead in front of you guys. But, it is what it is. Let's make the most out of it. And I hope you guys have a good time, a fun time, but also a time with God, listening to God today. So I'm happy to talk to you about the second half of the chapter 15 of the Gospel of John. But before I do that, let's briefly recap what Paul shared last Sunday. John 15 from verse 1 to verse 11. And what did it talk about? Jesus as the vine. Jesus as the true vine, actually. Another thing that Paul mentioned is that Jesus chose us, and that anyone who remains in him has life, and that we can produce fruit naturally if we remain and abide in the vine. But the question today is, how do we remain in the vine? If you read verse 10, it says, by obeying his commandments, by bearing fruit. Now the question is Jesus talking about all of the commandments? Is Jesus talking about one specific commandment? You find the answer in verse 12. It says to love each other as Jesus loved us. And what kind of love is this? A love that lays down one's life for his friends. That's in verse 13. Now the question is, why does Jesus call himself the true vine? Paul touched on it a little bit. It's because Israel is referred to as a vine planted by God in many parts of the Old Testament. And people grafted or planted into this vine were the ones that actually had a sort of connection to Yahweh, to Elohim, a sort of connection where they can talk to him, and not only connection, but they actually were under a covenant with God. People that were born Israelites or people that decided to be part of the Israelite people, of God's people. Now this vine was planted by God and was taken care of by God, but was ultimately judged by God. Now let's read again in verse 19. It says, if you belong to the world, it would love you as its own. As it is, you do not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world, and that is why the world hates you. Now, Jesus in this part uses the word belong twice in the same verse. He also uses the phrase chosen out of the world. So it feels to me like the passage, having verse 1 to 17 as its context, might be portraying the world as another tree, from which the disciples were transplanted into the true vine, the love of Jesus or Jesus himself. So the question is, what kind of tree would this be, if this is actually what the verse is saying? What kind of tree is the world tree? Or a better question, what is the world? So 1 John chapter 2, verse 15 to 16, we're not going to read it, but it basically explains that what characterizes the world is the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, and the pride of life. Now, here we have two different trees. One is a true vine, Jesus, and now all of a sudden we have a second tree, like the world tree. The question is, doesn't it ring a bell? Haven't we seen this good tree and a bad tree somewhere else? I think we have, haven't we? I think it's Genesis, right? It's Genesis. The first chapter is Genesis. We have the tree of life, and then we got the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We kind of see this tree's bad, good tree playing itself again in this passage. Now, what does Genesis say about the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? It says that it was pleasing to the eye, and then when Satan comes in the picture and trying to tempt Adam and Eve, in this case Eve, it says that if you take of this tree, you would be like God, knowing good and evil. Many theologians have written so much about what does this tree of the knowledge of good and evil mean. We're not going to go into that, but it basically gives humans the control back. With the second tree, you have a more of a hands-on control over what is good and evil. You get to define it, not God anymore. The second tree, rooted in fear, is all about the cult of me. It's all about getting mine. It's all about what benefits me. It's all about what I can get out of it. It's all about my potential. It's all about my personal dreams, my financial gain, my race, particular people over and against the other one. It's also about the power of defining what's true. And of course, this second tree with this system of roots has so much to do with our own particular cultures. And as we know, every culture is different. In order to do a fair analysis of every culture, I would need at least 10 cycles of reincarnation, where in one life I'm born a Nigerian, in the other one I'm born Canadian, in one I'm born an Indian, in one I'm born Chinese, or in the other one I'm born Dominicano. In this case, it's actually helpful to use the biblical notion of world, which in general terms englobes all cultures. Now, the big question is, what does it mean, or what are the consequences of being transplanted from one tree into the other one? What does it mean for the life of a now believer and follower of Christ, actually? Does it mean that all of a sudden I'm no longer influenced by culture, or no longer have a desire for my own glory or recognition, or a desire to put myself first? Does it mean that I'll automatically become a vegan, take a bath every day, or give away all of my possessions to the poor? Does it? What does it actually mean? Come, let me show you something.
It's so wet.
So let's talk about these two branches, this one and that one. No matter how hard this branch tries not to be like this branch, it can't. This branch could actually really try not to bear as much fruit as this one and actually maybe succeed. It's like, well done, little branch. You actually succeeded in not bearing as much fruit as this one. But their leaves look pretty much identical. The branch itself is pretty much identical to this one. No matter how much this one tries not to be this one, it just can't, because it's grafted to the same tree. So what is the real consequence of being grafted into the tree? It's identity, not fruit, identity. So when people talk about the difference between followers of Christ and people of the world, it's really hard not to make it all about performance. I mean, tell me about it. I've been really wrestling with this for many years. The difference is not based on what you don't do that those people do. I mean, I don't. And I don't. Neither do I. And I didn't. Yeah, I said it. I said it. Or did I? The consequence of being in one tree and not in the other is genetics. The most important consequence of being in the true vine is identity. It's what many theologians like to call union with Christ. So what does this union with Christ mean? What are they talking about? Union with Christ, or my union with the Jesus tree, is the basis for my present and my future as a branch. It is the basis for my own particular identity as a branch. You know, it all stems from Him. I don't try to come up with an ultimate future for my own, nor have to come with my own identity out of thin air. It all stems from Him. I have a beginning, but I also belong. As I am in union with Christ, I tap into the source of everything: love, power, peace, you name it. That is where I belong. And that is also where I'm heading. And I mean, how powerful is to say, I know where I am and I know where I'm going. I am in Jesus and I'm heading towards Jesus at the same time. In my journey, I'll make a lot of mistakes as I learn how to love God, love myself, and love others as I head towards my last stop, Jesus. And you know, if your last stop and your destination is Christ himself, you know, becoming someone important on earth doesn't really mean much. If I understand that my destination is Christ, then my big name doesn't really mean much, does it? Not where I'm going, it doesn't. Union with Christ is the center, heart, and core, telos, if you want, of all the redeemed. Without a union with Christ, there is no real love of neighbor, nor power, nor peace, nor transformation, or resurrection. A union with Christ is what ultimately defines Christianity. So, let's go back to where we started. So how do we remain in the vine? By obeying his commandments, bearing fruit. And what is the commandment in the context of the reading? To love each other as Jesus loved us. What kind of love is this? To lay down one's life for his friend. John 15:13. The crazy thing is how loving others makes us tap deeper into Christ himself. How do we remain in Christ? Love others with the sacrificial and empowering love of Christ. And as you do that, the unintended consequence will be you going deeper into Christ and deeper into his love.
When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father. Take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?" The king will reply, "Truly, I tell you, whatever you did for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me."
Now, loving others, tricky subject. And the Bible doesn't sugarcoat it at all. From the beginning, the Bible tells you loving others is difficult, it's crazy, it's tricky. The Bible has always been clear about how hard it is to love and serve others and the consequences of it. Let me say something else. From the birth of the church, not everyone was a teacher or an evangelist that would go door by door or from town to town preaching the gospel. Most were not, yet all were called to take care of the widow, the orphan, and the sick. We are all called to support, sustain, protect, and advocate for those in need, and to be ready as well to give an answer to everyone who asks us to give the reason for the hope that we have. Because ultimately, a display of sacrificial love would definitely beg for those kinds of questions. Dear Granville Chapel, we are in the love business. But it all starts with being grafted from the world tree into the true vine. It all stems out of it. It all stems from our union with Christ. And as we continue to love each other, we will sink deeper into Him and His love.